At some point in the future, here at the Oregon Trail School District, we're going to be transitioning to a hybrid learning environment. This is a new environment and it is exciting because it's going to give you elements of that face-to-face interaction with our students while still maintaining distance learning just like it was earlier in the year. In this video, I'm going to explore 3 points to ponder to help us get the most out of our hybrid learning environment. I'm Dennis Lane, and this is Teacher Tech on the Trail. As we begin planning and preparing for hybrid learning, we need to make sure that all students have access to a high-quality learning environment, regardless of the mode of learning. That means, regardless of how a student accesses your class, they know they're going to get the best possible learning activities. We can start to make this easier by following our first point to ponder. Develop a remote-first mindset. When planning for our hybrid learning, first plan for remote and then adapt those learning activities back to in-person. Using a remote-first mindset has a couple of benefits when it comes to planning in our lessons. One, it's going to alleviate the need for separate lesson plans for different learning modes. Everyone's on the same plan. Two, it's going to make it easier for planning because you're really using those same lessons that you use during distance learning. It's just a continuation of learning activities that you're already using. Three, it's going to help create continuity for students as they rotate in between in-person and remote learning. They're going to see the same types of learning activities. And four, really the biggest advantage is it is going to ensure equity for all students. So creating that remote-first mindset is going to be huge and extremely important as we start that transition to hybrid learning. The most exciting aspect of having students at least partially back in the classroom is that you get to build those traditional student and teacher relationships. There's going to be some semblance of that personal face-to-face interaction with students that really drew us to education. It's important to remember that even though you're going to have students at least partially in front of you, you still are going to have students who are learning remotely. Students who are in person are going to be kept physically distanced from each other and will have limited interaction with paper and textbooks and school supplies for most learning activities. Students in person will have their electronic devices and in your class, and it could be a district issued Chromebook, it could be a personal Chromebook or laptop or tablet. So even though they may not have those physical tools that we usually are typically used to, they will have access to the same digital tools that we had during remote learning. That leads me to point to ponder number 2. As we start to get ready for hybrid learning, we're going to be using the same digital tools for hybrid learning that we did in distance learning. In the in-person learning environment, students will still have access to the same set of tools as distance learning. Due to technological considerations, students who are in person in the classroom, they will not be able to use Google Meet on an individual basis, but that Meet can be projected on a screen and students can interact with each other through that. They will, though, have access to Pear Deck and Flipgrid and Kami and the Google Suite, and hybrid learning will rely heavily upon the digital tools, just like distance learning. Teachers are great at using informal questioning, student work spot checks, or observations, along with more formal measures like formative assessment, to gauge student learning and to measure class progress. You use this information to make adjustments to learning activities and get the most out of our students. Since students will be learning in person through distance learning, either synchronous or asynchronous, we can't just rely upon this impromptu or informal measures of student growth for feedback on our lessons or student progress. No, for hybrid, it brings us to our last point to ponder. Hybrid learning relies heavily upon formative assessment for all students. In order to meet the needs of our students, you're going to need to rely really heavily on the data that's going to come from formative assessments. By using the digital tools and building robust formative assessments, regardless of the mode, you will see how students are doing and we can make adjustments to meet their needs. It could be as simple as using Google Form to create a quick exit ticket in your lessons, or Kami for an activity that follows your learning targets, or maybe even a learning journal from Flipgrid. all of these things are going to give us data and information into our students. So our third point to ponder as we start to make our transition to hybrid learning is rely heavily on formative assessments. At some point, we're going to make the transition to a hybrid learning environment where you'll have students learning in person, synchronously remote, or asynchronously. This is a really new opportunity to grow as an educator and really to keep in mind our 3 points to ponder as we start to make this transition. 1, develop a remote-first mindset. 2, use the same digital tools in hybrid that we relied heavily upon in distance learning. And 3, rely heavily on formative assessment of all students. Remember, you don't have to go this alone. You have resources available. It could be your fellow teachers you work with, your principal. There's district-wide resources like myself, the tech department, Jen Manor. There's teachers in other districts who are all experiencing these same challenges, and there's even a growing amount of research on how to get the most out of hybrid learning. You don't have to do this alone. We're here together. This is an opportunity to experience a new mode of education and find education tools that we can bring into our classrooms in the future. We're going to start to make this transition to hybrid, and we are here together. I'm Dennis Lane, and keep moving forward.